I'm Paul Duffy, I'm Deputy Regional Manager with the NTA. I'm here today because I've got a real interest in criminal justice sort of background and interest in how we make the most of the opportunities that we have within the criminal justice system for helping people manage their vulnerabilities, both in identifying them and also then actually putting appropriate interventions in place.
I think we're about ready to make a start. I'm Paul Duffy, I'm Deputy Regional Manager with the NTA. I used to work at the university up until 5 months ago, so they collared me to bring me back and chair this session. I think for me, I come from a criminal justice research background essentially, and for me the criminal justice system has always presented ideal opportunities to identify and then work with people who have vulnerabilities. I think one of the issues we've had is that we've not always used the best models to do that. We've become quite good at identifying them often, but not necessarily then with actually making a difference in what they've done. I mean, I think the drug and alcohol field is potentially an area for that, where actually over the past 7 or 8 years there's been a lot of work that's ended up identifying people within the system with vulnerability, so in that case drug and alcohol use, but sometimes it's been a struggle to actually get them the most appropriate response when they come back into the community, or particularly within prison settings. I think that there's a real opportunity to tie in the whole personalisation agenda here in the future as well. And I know that Rich is going to talk a little bit about the sort of peer mentoring angle, and it's about providing that sort of personalisation that can really be done on a one-to-one basis. That doesn't mean that we get a one-size-fits-all response. And hopefully by doing that, by increasing broad personal skills and by maybe sort of looking at assets instead of looking at needs, we can try to actually make a difference for people in the criminal justice system. So we've got 3 talks that look at, I suppose, different elements of sort of identification and then work with people with specific vulnerabilities within the criminal justice system today. And I think we're going to start with Ellie, who's going to talk about the turnaround project. So Ellie's actually a public health researcher within the centre here, and she's going to be talking to us about the evaluation of the Together Women's project. Okay.
My name's Ellie McCoy, and I'm a researcher based at the Centre for Public Health at Liverpool John Moores University, and I'm here today to talk about the Liverpool Turnaround Project, which is a service for women offenders and women at risk of offending, and I've carried out a qualitative piece of work looking at how this service impacts the women that attend, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
Hiya, my name's Ellie and I'm a researcher based at the Centre for Public Health, and I'm going to be talking today about the evaluation of the Turnaround Project, which is a service for female offenders and women at risk of offending. So we were asked to do this piece of work by Liverpool PCT because often services set up that work with offending sort of aim to look at the reoffending stats, and they wanted a more holistic evaluation, so to look at how it's impacting the women's lives, and having a look at more of the soft outcomes rather than just the reoffending. So we set out to do that through an evaluation, and today I'm just going to talk about the qualitative side of it, and to have a look at the impact on the women's lives. Okay, so what do we know about women and offending? We know that offending is less common in women, but however, proportionately more women are remanded in custody than males, even though they offend less. We know that there's been an increase in the female prison population, but no equivalent rise in the amount of crimes being committed by females or the amount of serious crimes being committed. We know that the patterns of offending are different to males. Women tend to commit less serious crimes. They're more involved with the acquisitive crimes such as like theft, stealing, shoplifting, fraud, that kind of thing. And quite a high proportion of women who are sent to prison actually receive a short sentence of under a year. Women offenders also typically have a history of unmet needs, and when they enter the criminal justice system, they often present with multiple problems, which include drug and alcohol misuse, accommodation needs, education and training and employment needs. Financial problems often can be in a lot of debt, often are victims of domestic abuse, and also can experience mental health problems as well. Women also are often the sole carers of dependent children, so resulting in a custodial sentence does have an increased risk of family breakdown, especially because there's not many women's prisons in England and Wales, so women often find themselves located far away from their children with no access to see them. Okay, so this increase in the female prison population and after a number of deaths at Style Prison led to the Corston Review, which was in 2007, and Baroness Jean Corston conducted the review to have a look at women within the criminal justice system. She found that provision in the criminal justice system is based, it's focused on males and hasn't really been adapted over the years to meet the needs of female offenders. And she also found that women are inappropriately being sent to prison as well. So women have different needs, so they require a different approach. So there is a need for community provision to divert women away from results in custody. So Corston said that we needed a multi-agency approach because women do present with multiple problems, and that it should be women-centred and look at empowerment. So following the Corston Review, there was a number of services set up over the last few years, the main one being the Together Women project, which was set up a few years ago. We had one based here, and now we've got the Turnaround project, which I'm going to go on to talk about. So the Turnaround project is part of PSS Liverpool, and it's commissioned by Probation, and also it receives additional funding from Liverpool PCT. It's a female-only service for women already involved in the criminal justice system and for women at risk of offending. And the project is designed to divert women away from custody. It's designed to reduce the number of children being taken away from their mothers, and it also aims to improve women's well-being. So the project is based at the Community Justice Centre in Liverpool, and they also have a number of outreach services across Liverpool, and they also conduct a weekly session over at Style Prison as well. The project does work with the criminal justice system, mainly probation, courts and prison, and it will work with women before the sentence, during any kind of order they receive, and after they're released from prison, if they do go to prison. So they often, women will, rather than go to prison, have so many set hours to carry out their probation, and also are required to attend the Turnaround project. The project does, however, still work with self-referrals and non-criminal justice services as well. And it utilises quite a lot of partnership working across Liverpool, including the drug and alcohol services, the housing services, and so on. So they provide a number of activities and services at the project, including some of the ones that I've got listed here. So they do some like fun activities like Zumba, bingo, stuff for the women to attend and have fun at, but then they also attend training and programmes aimed at helping with domestic abuse. They've got the Freedom programme, and they've also got parenting programmes. So as you can see, they do quite a range. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about the qualitative side of what the work we carried out. So we carried out a number of interviews, focus groups and telephone interviews. And most of the women we spoke to were referred through the criminal justice service, although there was a few voluntary women as well. And the staff also produced a number of case studies for us, just to show how women move through the project and what type of interventions they receive while they're there. So I'm just going to start by showing you two examples of the case studies. I provided two different case studies, so you can see one of a woman who's come through criminal justice service and one who's self-referred. And as you can see, the women who are attending this project do have multiple needs when they start attending. So case study one was someone referred as part of an order, so it was compulsory for her to attend. She had a history of, she'd been abused as a child, she had a history of self-harm and suicide attempts. She had accommodation needs, she was a victim of a domestic abusive relationship, and her children had been taken into care, and she was also alcohol dependent when she started the project. So she received a number of interventions, including one-to-one work and group work, and she attended the Freedom programme, which specifically looks at domestic abuse. And as you can see, they've provided some outcomes as to what was happening with the woman currently, and so she's still on her order at the moment, but she's working towards completing it. She's enrolled on a tenancy scheme, so she should have her accommodation sorted soon. She hasn't offended during her time at the project, and she is reduced her alcohol consumption, and that was through a referral to an alcohol service. She was focusing on that. Different type of journey through was someone who self-referred in. This was someone who was signposted after attending a drug service, and this specific lady was someone who'd witnessed a severe case of violence, and then found herself isolated, and when she was isolated it resulted in using drugs. So she'd been a heroin user for a few years. Her children were in care, and she was very, very isolated when she first started. So she had a number of different interventions as well, including specific work for her drug use and counselling for trauma and grief. Now this woman is currently 13 weeks drug free after about 7 or 8 years of using heroin. She's now allowed unsupervised visits with her child, and she's actually fighting for custody, and turnaround projects are helping to do that by providing monthly progress reports to social services. So there's just 2 examples of what the project does. So I'm just going to go through a few of the main themes that we identified from talking to the women, and how the project impacts on their lives. So communication was something that was a big issue for them, the fact that they got on really well with all the staff. They were all assigned an individual key worker who they could see on a one-to-one basis, but they could attend the group sessions as well. They described staff as friendly and supportive and flexible, and the staff were non-judgmental, and the women felt really comfortable within the project. Their views were important to the project. The staff were constantly looking at ways to improve and update the service, and the women always had an input in that, so they felt like they had a voice. They also had freedom to choose whatever activities they wanted to attend, which was good, because say if they were there because it was compulsory to attend, they still had the freedom to choose what specific groups they thought would help them. The service also liaised with probation, say if you're on an order, because obviously it's compulsory to attend, so there was good communication between probation and the project as well. Okay. And I've got a quote on each slide as well. I won't read them out, but if you can say. Okay, so we want to look specifically at the outcomes, what the women achieved since attending the project, and what had it done for them. So all the women felt they'd got the kind of service they wanted, and that they'd made significant changes in their lives since attending the project, and they felt that they were able to deal with problems more effectively since coming along. So they discussed changes and improvements in like reduced alcohol and drug use, better relationships, more contact with their children if they were in care. Some of them had started employment, some of them had gone back to do education. They noted physical health and mental health improvements. None had offended, and they had better social skills. They were enjoyed the group work. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more now about the specific outcomes for the women. So trust was one of the main things that come up for the women. The fact that due to a number of different factors, some of them mentioned domestic abuse, that they found it really hard to trust people, and they were really wary of the project when they first attended, but the fact that the staff had made them feel so welcome and the women around, that they felt safe and secure within the project. It's also a secure building that you have to be let into. You can't just come in and go, and it's a women only service as well. And everything in the one-to-one and the group work, the women all felt was confidential, and they could say what they wanted and be trusted. Okay, confidence was another thing that the women had gained from attending the project. They'd all found an improvement in their self-esteem. A lot of them felt very low before attending the project. They felt more confident speaking in a group setting. A lot of them were really reluctant to do the group work to begin with, because they were not used to mixing in groups, but actually they got an awful lot from it, and they made a lot of friendships from it as well. Just a couple of quotes there. Equality was another main thing that came up. The fact that the women had felt judged and stigmatised in the past due to their offending and drug use and associated things, that they felt quite judged, whereas the minute they walked through the doors of the turnaround, they felt comfortable, and they felt on an equal footing with staff and the other women that attended, and they found it really helpful to be around women in similar situations and not on their own. So they felt more positive about themselves, and could see the achievements and the goals they were hitting. A lot of them were talking about the outcomes they've achieved, and that they could see that. Isolation, as I said, the women didn't feel so alone. A lot of them had come from isolation where they weren't leaving the house very often, they weren't seeing many people, and they didn't really have any interaction. So since attending the project, they had the staff to talk to, but they also had friends they've made, the other women attending the project. They all got on really well. And it was a way, so, you know, they were obviously working at programmes and working towards achieving, you know, different goals, but they actually got friends out of it as well. They supported each other and helped each other out with problems. And it was open. One of the focus group sessions we talked about the fact that it was going to be open over Christmas period, and this is a time when a lot of the women said they felt really isolated if they were estranged from their children. So the fact that they had this support network set up, which I think was a really important thing to come from the work. The fact that it was a women's only service was a good thing. They much preferred it. Some of the women talked about the fact that they may have had some issues with men in the past if they've been victims of domestic abuse. So it was somewhere where they, as I said before, they felt safe and they felt they could trust people, and they found it empowering. A lot of them, you know, referred to, you know, girl power, and that it was women sticking together, and there was a real sort of sense of loyalty to each other as well. And they often talked about the project as their space. There was a breakfast club where they could come in and just have breakfast and hang out together and stuff. So, where, as I say, it did have the important work as well. It had somewhere for them to go and somewhere to call their own. I also wanted to say if women thought that it improved their psychological and physical health since attending the project. So I used a top scale, which is designed by the NTA, and 0 is poor, 20 is good, and asked women where would you have put yourself on that scale before attending the project, and where would you put yourself now. So for psychological health, they were all right down the bottom. Everyone was around 0, 1, 2, and they said, you know, off the scale, really, really bottom of the scale. And then all the women who I spoke to, bar one, had improved past 15, with the majority of them saying, you know, 18, 19, and for them to point out on the scale just how much difference they felt since attending. So they talked about improvements in depression and anxiety, and just their general well-being. They felt a lot better. We didn't do the health on the scale because a lot of women didn't really see their health as a problem beforehand, so they couldn't really quantify it. But they did say that since attending the project that they've had opportunities to address any health issues, and it's put them in touch with, a lot of them weren't registered with GPs, they had no access to getting help from other services. So by attending, they had the ability to get any help they needed. So a lot of people talk about like cutting down their alcohol use and stopping smoking and a wide variety. And they recognised that, you know, the project did provide all round support. It wasn't just about the offending, it was helping them with all different aspects. According to the women, none of them had re-offended during the time on the project, but they did say that they felt if they did have a slip that they wouldn't fear talking to turnaround about it. They could go straight away and say, you know, not feel like they had to lie, not feel judged, and have the further support to not offend again. So it was good that they felt they could be totally honest with the project. So I asked the women what their plans were next. A lot of the women, I talked to them at different points in at the time of the project, but a lot of them was ongoing, so they just had planned to continue. Not many people talked sort of about the end, but they said they'd be lost without it, and they wanted to carry on voluntary, which did allow that. A lot of the women who did attend voluntary had originally come in through the criminal justice service anyway, and had then come back voluntary, so they weren't there compulsory doing their hours. They were there because they wanted to be. Some women talked about you know, the fact that some had started education and training programmes. There was a couple of women that had started work again, and some were interested in a mentoring scheme, and which the project's currently setting up a peer mentoring scheme, so hopefully they'll be able to get involved with that. Okay, I asked them if they had any recommendations, you know, could they improve the service, so. But yeah, that was about, you know, as the most important thing, more prizes for bingo. There was literally not much at all that they had problems with. They found that it was all working well. Any issues they had were addressed immediately, and they felt like they had a voice, and they'd recommend it to other people. The smaller things that they did want was just additional resources, really. You know, it's only quite a small location, so another one-to-one room would be ideal. You know, extended hours, maybe some. They do get save away tickets for the bus travel and stuff, with just some extra support in that way, and yet more prizes for the bingo. One of the things that did come up was the advertisement, that it's not very widely advertised at all, really, and unless you're coming through the criminal justice service, then you're not likely to hear about it, and a lot of the women thought so many more women could be benefiting from it, so that was something they really wanted to be addressed. So when Corsten set out her report, she said there was 3 categories of vulnerability. So there's domestic, personal and socio-economic circumstances, and as just discussed, women who are already offending or at risk of offending, do have an awful lot of these circumstances which are going to be made worse by prison, or they could develop these vulnerabilities in prison. So you can see the turnaround projects and services like it are working to address all of them issues. The women are, addressing substance use, helping with alcohol, they're looking at housing for them. They're not isolated anymore, they've got friends, they've got a support network, they do a lot of work around domestic abuse. So that's it really. It was just to sort of highlight the good work, and obviously in the report we do have more recommendations and more conclusions, but today I just wanted to sort of focus on the outcomes for the women, but the fact that it is addressing the associated problems that women at risk of offending have, and the importance of the women's involvement in the work, the fact that the project did include them and they did feel like they had a voice. And and we do look at the softer outcomes and not just at the reoffending rate, because if in statistics you're not always going to see how big an impact it has on people's lives, and the fact that they're not alone and they don't have to spend Christmas drunk because they're alone and things like that. So the importance of including them in the work. But the report should be available on our website next week. So there's a link to our website, but there's my email address as well. So if anyone would like a copy, if you email me, I can send you a copy, and I can send you a copy of the presentation and any questions anyone might have. And there's just some further reading if anyone would like to read up on it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Cuddy. I'm a DIP researcher based at the Centre for Public Health in Liverpool John Moores University, and my presentation today is an evaluation of the impact of DIP on offending across Merseyside. Hello everybody, as Paul has said to you, my name is Kevin Cuddy. I work as a DIP research assistant at the Centre for Public Health. For those of you who don't know, DIP stands for Drug Interventions Programme. More of which are known anyway. I'll talk to you in a little bit more detail about it. Title of this presentation, an evaluation of DIP's impact on offending in Merseyside. In contrast to Ellie's turnaround project evaluation, this is much more quantitative in nature, so probably not as interesting, but we'll have plenty of data to get through. But hopefully we'll give you an idea behind the past 10 years of DIP, how it looks across Merseyside as a whole. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview of what I'll talk about, a couple of things around the research that's been done so far on drug use and offending worldwide, just touching on some very obvious points which lead into this. I'll talk to you about the DIP service, where it's come from, how it's developed and so on. I'll give you an outline of the research that we undertook here at Centre for Public Health, talk a little about the methodology around that research, then look at the findings and some recommendations that we have on the back of our findings, and at the end I'll just touch on some limitations around the study which will hopefully lead to future work. So that's the plan anyway. Okay, so I mean there's a wealth of research worldwide really that drug users commit more crime under the influence of drugs than not. That's right across the world, from studies back in the 70s and 80s in the United States to up to this day really in the UK. The NTA gave us a figure quite recently in 2011 that the cost of drug-related crime was almost £14 billion, so you're looking at some quite serious numbers there. And they always talk around acquisitive crime also, which is really economic crime, so things that drug users will commit if the link is there to fund their drug use. It's a well-established link. It's talked about quite a lot in research, but it's a lot more complex really than just being a causal link. I mean, you'll see half of those arrested in England for acquisitive crime at the moment test positive, but you can't definitively say really that sort of one person offends to fund their drug use, so the person standing beside them who offends is doing it to fund their drug use also. It's a much more complex relationship than that. The European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction would stipulate to us that that's only one of 4 factors. You've got socioeconomic factors, there's also psychopharmacological factors. We also have just a pure drug using factor as well linked into that. So there's quite a lot of reasons really why people will use drugs. Offending is a large part of it, but it's not the only part. However, drug users will come into contact with criminal justice system, as obviously, as you know, the taking of illegal drugs makes them liable for arrest always, due to the fact that they are using illegal drugs. From the mid-90s, really this push around drug use started within government, and they looked to link it to drug treatment. There's always been that evidence then quite quickly that drug treatment impacts favourably on offending levels within drug users. Again, NTA figures for you, there are almost 5 million crimes prevented nationally in 2011, saving us the best part of £1 billion to society. So, you know, obviously quite substantial and quite an obvious reason for drug treatment to be pushed at all levels really, both locally and nationally. We've seen two strands of drug treatment over time within the UK. The voluntary treatment, which is the most common one, so things like where people will be referred into treatment from a variety of interventions and will undergo treatment to deal with their drug use, hopefully over time coming out the other side drug free. A study completed in 2009, the Detour study, evaluating treatment services, found them very effective in reducing harmful behaviours around drug use, and also effective in reducing the acquisitive crime that these drug using offenders commit. The second strand, the more coerced strand, things like drug rehabilitation orders, DRRs, the old DTTOs that you'll be familiar with as well, some of you, where courts have mandated that drug users enter treatment for their drug use. And studies have also shown some success in the orders, with increases over time in numbers of orders and also successful completions on the back of those orders. So as part of the overall drive really to look at this link between drug use and treatment, and to try and get drug users into treatment, DIP was set up in 2003 by the government, with 2 main aims really: to direct drug misusers into treatment and also to reduce crime. And whereas treatment services tended to operate on their own, also drug rehabilitation orders, DTTOs, operate on their own also. The key to the success of DIP right from the start was deemed to be a multi-agency approach. So you'd have criminal justice agencies, but also treatment providers on this, government departments and local teams, all working together to direct users into treatment to deal with their drug use, and hopefully as a consequence of that to reduce their crime and the impact they have on society. At that point, prior to 2006, if somebody offended, they were arrested. When they got to charge stage, if they were charged, they would be drug tested. If they tested positive, they would move on through the system, but all assessments at that point were voluntary. So there really was no sort of catch for these drug users. If they wanted to drop out or they didn't want to engage with drug services, they didn't have to. They'd take the consequence, I guess, as the charge of the offence and work from there, whether that be going to prison or maybe back into society. April 2006 saw tough choices introduced, and the aim of tough choices really was to make it harder for offenders to resist treatment, harder for them to resist assessment by drug workers also. So a mandatory element was added to DIP, whereby people who were arrested in custody suites were drug tested at that point, not at the point of charge. It came forward to the point of arrest, which made it much harder for them to resist really, because they would, if they tested positive in the suite, be subject to a mandatory assessment by drug workers. So the aim really was to try and get them much earlier in the process, so they come in, tested positive, hopefully they would see a drug worker straight away, and that this would lead to them hopefully engaging into treatment. So this coercive element at the start of DIP sort of mirrored the orders that courts would give down, and then as DIP progresses it became voluntary, much like sort of mainstream treatment services are. So DIP has been going for 10 years now. We've had very little research on a national level really as to the impact it has had, which is quite amazing given the copious amounts of money that have been put into DIP. The one sort of main research project that we got, and it was done back in 2007, and it actually looked at clients who were part of the DIP process before Tough Choices came in and those who were part of the process after Tough Choices. So I mean, that's, you know, it's looking at data which is 7-8 years old at this stage, and obviously the face of DIP has changed quite a bit in relation to drug use and so on. But what they did find was 26% reduction in offending among those where a positive test brought them into contact in DIP, and half of this cohort showed a 79% reduction. So I mean, even at that stage we saw the early impact that DIP had on offending. It was reducing offending, but the point at the bottom there is really quite an important one, and they found that offending levels actually increased for a quarter of the cohort that they looked at, and that these high crime causing users saw no significant reductions in offending, which in itself is rather worrying. If you've got sort of the high crime causing users group who are offending at quite a high level and that offending isn't reducing at all, then you have to question sort of the impact DIP is having. Some kind of quick limitations around that. I mean, there was no examination of the level of the DIP interventions client got. Everybody was just grouped into the one cohort and taken from there. There was no control group to measure this group against, so sort of everybody in the group was subject to DIP. They couldn't compare with any group in society who had not been subject to DIP intervention. So it's very hard to attribute the reduction that we talked about earlier to DIP intervention. And also, and probably the most important point of it, the impact of the actual arrest was not explored to any degree by the authors. I mean, thankfully I've never been there myself, but I would imagine that for most people, getting arrested, brought to a custody suite and so on would probably make you think twice possibly about being arrested again to a large degree. So unfortunately this wasn't being able to be looked at, and still remains a problem to this day, in fairness with research. More area focused, this was a piece of work done by David Best, who some of you might have heard of before in the drugs world. He looked specifically at the high crime causing users. They created an enhanced treatment service for them. The basic proviso being that sort of more serious offenders may need further drive really than just basic DIP intervention to deal with their offending. There may need to be a continued coercive part to their treatment. They found that those who did have this quasi-coercive strand, as he calls it, had a 55% reduction in offending, but no reduction at all amongst the DIP-only group. So again, you can see kind of to a large degree there that DIP, again, not having an impact, according to this research, on the high crime causing users whatsoever. Again, I mean, those targeted high crime users as well had failed to engage previously, so the reduction in these arrests is most encouraging, because they would have stayed away from DIP or mainstream treatment services in the past. So from our point of view then, and we've done a couple of reports on this before, this is the third in a series of reports we've done. Our aim was to build on the truism from our reports before that clients in Merseyside reduced their offending, basically looking to mirror what the national study had shown. But we also wanted to go that bit further and see what level of DIP intervention had any effect on people's offending. We also wanted to look then at client attributes and find if there was any critical factors around these that influence the offending behaviour. So is there any drivers in particular amongst clients that would bring them to reduce their offending behaviour when they come into contact with DIP? So we have three separate sources of data. Drug testing data, which came from Merseyside custody suites, the dip monitoring data which dip workers completed themselves, and we also had access to PNC data from Merseyside Police. We looked at a 3-month cohort of drug testers, and we matched both the dip monitoring data and the PNC data to that to give us the outcomes for these clients. Around the methodology, I'll just sort of a couple of slides on this. I'll just talk through them pretty quickly. We looked at how many offences clients have been arrested for in the 12 months pre and post arrest. We coded each pre and post and so on, and we used a gravity factor system to classify scales of offences. Scales went from 1 to 4, 4 being the most serious offence, down to 1, things like public disorderly use of which are scored not so highly, and we created aggregated files in SPSS. We gave matrix scores to clients, which was done by number of offences in the period times seriousness of offence, to try and sort of give a better opinion of how serious the offending was within these different cohorts. And we created 3 outcome groups based on the level of dip intervention. So we looked at those who were assessed only, so they had a positive test, were assessed by the DIP team but went no further than that. We looked at clients who were care planned, so they came in after a positive test and went on to be care planned by and managed by the DIP team themselves. And our third group was a no further DIP contact group, so clients who were arrested, tested positive but had no contact whatsoever with the DIP teams across Merseyside. We sort of brought all those together within SPSS again, and we created one overall file for analysis. Within that, the demographic characteristics that we analysed were things like age, gender, drug use, and we also looked at time on caseload. Was there any prison contact post positive test? And we looked also to see was there a future DIP contact after that positive test. We also broke our offending down in an effort to mimic both the national research and the research done by David Best. We broke them into 3 categories of offenders, low, medium and high, and we broke offences down also into more generic categories. So we looked at acquisitive offences, drugs offences, and then categorised the others as other offences. Statistical analysis done on these, and we also ran correlation analysis to see if length of time on caseload was associated with a reduction in offending. So what did we find? Figure in red from our overall is sort of 2.86. You see number of offences pre-test, then contact with DIP, and number of offences post-test. So you'll see significant reduction in the number of overall offences, and significant reductions between the groups also, and also within groups. So quite positive on the face of it. We've seen a reduction in offending, and we've seen a reduction in all groups of offending. However, I think the important thing from this is, if you look at the group on the bottom, the no further DIP contact, and their offending reduced by more than the other 2 groups, which obviously jumps out at us straight away. Same pattern for seriousness of offending, the largest reduction amongst those who had no DIP contact beyond their positive test. So as I've said, 33% reduction in offending, which on the face of it is really good. But what we found that levels of involvement in DIP are not dependent on levels of reduction. We've seen that reductions are highest amongst those without any DIP contact. So, you know, really it's not a positive look on the actual sort of, you look at the overall DIP intervention. Again, sort of the differences we found were between the no DIP contact group and those who were care planned, showing really that to reduce offending, on the face of it at least, it would appear that positive DIP involvement is not critical. However, I should say at this point that we didn't have access to prison data. Those people in the high offending group, by virtue of their high offending, would be more likely to go to prison. They'd be more likely to have orders set down by the courts for them, which may have had substantial impacts on their offending levels also, that we can't actually definitively say at this point, but it is something to certainly be wary of. we found also when we looked at the assessments, people who were just assessed or people who were care plans, we found no significant differences there, suggesting really that care planning would have no extra impact on offending than that initial contact with a drugs worker in the custody suites. To take that a little bit further though, we did look at clients who were actually care plans. So the aim of DIP obviously is to bring clients in, talk to them around their drug use, bring them onto the DIP caseload, and hopefully at the end of their journey they will be drug free and in a position to not go back to offending either. What we did find were significant reductions in the number of offences and also in the seriousness of offending for clients who went through DIP and came out the other end with a positive outcome. Something we didn't find for clients who had a negative outcome as a result of their DIP, of being on the DIP caseload. So I mean, that sort of says to us really, and it highlights to a large degree the positive aspect around people completing the DIP. If they are engaged with DIP, coming out the other end will show substantial reductions in offending. What we didn't see was a relationship between length of time. I talked about correlation analysis earlier. There was no relationship found between length of time and the impact on either levels or seriousness of offending, indicating that longer you spend on the caseload does not necessarily mean that the less likelihood that you will offend in the future. We also looked at the different offending groups, mostly really with both the national and area research in mind, where they saw no reductions whatsoever in those who commit sort of the high crime causing users in their area. We did find this in Merseyside. We found that the largest reductions and the largest scale of reductions were amongst those who offended the greatest prior to their positive test. And that's quite a positive finding really from our data, looking at, given that these high crime causing users will have the most impact on society more than likely. We found it extremely positive that in both number and seriousness of offending, that the highest reductions were in that high offending group. I would just, in a note of caution on that, you can see that they still commit 4.5 mean number of offences in the 12 months post, so it's quite clear that the offending hasn't stopped entirely obviously within this group, but nevertheless the signs are positive for that group also. We tried to take it a step further then and look to see what factors influence offending, what demographic characteristics, what other variables may impact on a client's propensity to offend. We found two positive outcomes really. We found that clients who did come onto the DIP caseload were far less likely to come back into contact with DIP than those who did not. So much like the positive outcome finding, you know, that's a very positive finding also, for want of a better word. Yet the likelihood of representing significantly less amongst those who engage with DIP compared to those who don't. We also found that clients engaging who go on to the care plan were significantly less likely to go to prison than those who did not engage with DIP, which again is positive. In relation to the other demographic characteristics, what we found that neither age nor gender had an influence on offending. It was interesting though, and it sort of flew in the face of national research done by the Ministry of Justice last year, who found that sort of males were more likely to reoffend and so on. And males, we found that females committed higher number of offences in the 12 months post than males did, and they also showed lesser reductions in offending across Merseyside than males, and that really highlights the need across Merseyside for an increased focus on these female clients. Female clients also made up less of the care plan group proportionally than others, so just kind of highlighting again the need to focus on these and to try and bring them into treatment. We found changes in offending regardless of drug use. Significant reductions only amongst those testing positive for cocaine and opiates. We did find a substantial proportion of these in the no further contact group, so we would have expected that significant reduction to be there. Changes were seen for all levels of weekly expenditure on drugs, and reductions were also seen amongst the 3 offending groups, but no significant differences, and a similar pattern for alcohol consumption. So sort of on a Merseyside level, 3 recommendations really to take away from it. This no further dip contact group was what really jumped out the most, and they have had great reductions in offending, greater reductions compared to the other 2 groups, but we still see their offending at quite a high level, and we would like to do another study with hopefully prison data this time, as well as the police data which we already have, to be able to track these clients better, to be able to better state whether their offending has actually reduced due to being in prison, is it due to orders, or what is bringing about that reduction. We recommend that, given the positive findings around clients who were care planned in relation to less chance of future contact with DIP, less chance of going to prison, that clients would stay engaged with treatment once the legislative element of DIP has passed. And we also recommend, if possible, a feedback procedure for those clients who do re-present to ascertain the reasons why they previously disengaged from the process. And finally, as I've touched on, that increased focus needed on female clients. So finally then, just some limitations around the study which will hopefully lead to future work being done. Much like with the national study by Scodbo, we're not able to ascertain the impact that the arrest may have had also on the propensity of reoffending amongst clients. We looked at total offences rather than self-reported, which would give us far higher numbers had we done that, but what we were looking to do was assess the direction of the change in offending rather than just sort of pure numbers of offences. We left out non-trigger offences, as DIP was originally set up to deal with trigger offences only. And with the changing nature of DIP, and with other reports that we've produced within the DIP team showing that the increase in non-trigger offences coming through DIP, it may be that a study of the impact on DIP of non-trigger offences is also warranted. Our police data was limited to Merseyside only, so again we can only measure offending within Merseyside and nothing outside of that. We also lacked a control group, which at the moment really is very difficult to do given that DIP is in place everywhere across England and Wales. This may change. Home Office have took the ring fence off the DIP monies, so it may be the case that some areas will cease to use DIP in the near future, so we may be able to get a control group from another area to hopefully compare to Merseyside. And finally, our data did not provide any information on health and social functioning brought about through contact with DIP. We would like also in the future to use treatment outcome profile data, or TOPS as it's known, to examine this. And I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Sorry. He just made up for the fact that Ellie saved time as well. I thought it was really interesting in terms of the parallel, the stuff that Ellie was talking about a specialised service, and I suppose within current austerity people may question whether it's possible to really commission a service, but given what Kev's just said about the lower rates of impact on female clients, I think it points to the need for something specialised for that group as well. So I think there's a nice thread running through there. And now for the main attraction. What I always think is important, and I suppose I would say this toeing the NTA party line nowadays, is the idea that we get some views from the right side of the fence, if you like. So from people who've actually sort of experienced the systems and have come out with learning from that system with some lived experiences they can share with other people. And so Richard's kindly come along today to talk to us about some of his work around peer mentoring, which I'm really interested in. I think it would be interesting to see how some of this tallies up with some of the learning from Ellie's talk as well. Richard?
Hi, my name is Richard Banton. I'm here today to talk about ex-offenders and reoffending, and also about vulnerable inmates within the prison system in Britain.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming out. It's weather bad, isn't it? you're all here, and I'm glad. I never mind, it's not a full house, but if there's only one of you to turn up, I'll still be right here. You know, well, tell you about myself. I'm Richard Banton. I'm a Capricorn. My birthday is already, guys, 3rd. Anyway, I'm an ex-offender. And I've been, not saying I was privileged, but I turn it around on a positive basis. I've been an inmate in quite a few institutions around the world. Now, today we talk about reoffending. We're going to talk about the vulnerability about, you know, within the prison system. Now, who are the offenders really? Any of you smoke in here? Nobody smoke? You flick your butt when you want to, don't you? That's offending. You've been a little one, right? But just didn't get caught. Now, offending is a thing that we all do something to offend the law in some way, maybe in your house or, you know. But the main thing is, we got a good system going on in Britain. Now, I've been in an institution in Panama. Wouldn't like to talk about that. That'd take like a whole week. Yeah. I've been in Jamaica, New York. I grew up in New York, and in Zwolle in Holland. Now, what turned my life around here, why I'm a qualified mentor now, is getting into the system in Britain, being arrested, actually going inside a British jail. It's a hotel. I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm like, what these guys are up to? You get new denim, brand new shirt, you know, nice bed. You get your linen changed 3 times a week. You also got telly. And you also pay £1 a week for council taxes. Anyone know that? Yes, you do. Now, there's an educational system going on behind the walls. A lot of guys take it for granted, yeah? They come in, they look at it, they walk out, they come back in. Now, when I first got in, I was like, okay, let me see what's going on. But you know what's the turning point for me? A lot of you have got professions, right? Are you good at it? If you've gone over 5 years within it, you must get good at it. Now, I was lucky to stand up in front of a good judge. Been on the bench for more than 30 years. He looked at my record, he looked at me, he said, Richard, stand up. I'm going to make sure you never come back in one of these places anymore. I'm giving you a plan. And he outlined the plan in my papers. I followed it, and the first thing, I never finished school. I've been to school, but I never finished and get a, you know, certificate or whatever. But the first time I entered, I was assessed. Get a maths test, English. I passed, and I get a certificate. Like, wow, I become a certificate junkie. Seriously, I do. I got 64 in my house. 64. If I brought it here today, it would come to home wall. Right? The biggest one I just got from Solihull University, Solihull College, was my BTEC level 4 in mentoring. Now I'm qualified to talk to any one of you. Okay? Now we got students in here, right? Where the students are. Okay. You know I respect you guys, but when I'm dead and gone, you're going to shake the world for my kids. Yes, you do. So I respect you a lot for listening. Now, being vulnerable, that comes anywhere. Comes anywhere. You can walk through this door and be vulnerable. You can step on a plane. You can step into a shop. But behind the walls that we're talking about now is offenders and offending, right? I was an offender, but I put my hand up every time. I never cost the government anything. So right now I'm here telling you that all these offenders, they can be recycled. It might sound funny, you're recycling human beings. I'm not being Frankenstein here or anything like that, but their minds. I recycle my mind. Michael Jackson done a music, sang a music about man in the mirror. All of us use mirrors. We see the reflection of ourselves. And how are you going to change the world if you don't change yourself first? You got to change yourself first. So that's what I did. I changed myself first. Now I got to this stage by attending classes. There's a whole lot of classes in jail. A whole lot of classes in British system. Does anyone know how much money it costs to keep one offender behind the wall? Does anyone know?
I'll have a guess. £47,000 a year.
Wow, you must be a probation officer. Well, he's actually right. A year ago it was 45, and that's per head. We got over 100,000 inmates behind the wall, and that's not checking in the police lockups. That's just behind the prison wall itself when you actually get a sentence. Now, if you work the math, taxpayers are paying a lot of money to keep these guys inside. You got civilians who go in and teach them, and they ignore it. I never ignore that. The system works. British system works within the prison wall. It does, right? It might sound funny, people raising their eyebrows like, wow, this guy's crazy, he's on crack. No. It does work. But you have to implicate the punishment. You don't find some guy mugging an old lady on the street and he got 3 months for that, and he goes in and he keeps doing the same thing again. That gotta stop. And it's gotta stop by implicating programs for it to stop, right? The programs are there, but they're not being enforced. It's too laid back, right? And vulnerability, I'll tell you an incident that happened, and this is real. You got judges, right? They're people like us. They get angry. They get angry, get upset. Wake up in the morning, find out his mortgage lapsed. He's like, oh, anyone comes in front of him, he's gonna put that gavel down. But this guy went up in front of the judge, 5 parking tickets. 5 parking tickets he got. The judge upset, gave him 9 days. What happened? It's just a misdemeanor. He got 9 days, nobody monitored this guy. Within 2 days he hanged himself. Just look at that. He never had a record in all his life. I mean, 2 days behind the prison wall, he hanged himself. Now you think about that. If he was being monitored from the minute you got in, that wouldn't have happened. And you find a lot of people who are vulnerable, self-harmers, they do a lot of stuff. Some of them even went in and never come out because they lost their mind. They commit a hideous crime inside because somebody tried to bully them. And they didn't even know they could kill somebody in jail. They never come out. So before all that happens, you have to be monitored. All the inmates got to be monitored. When you get arrested and start going to the system, you got to be monitored. If you're not monitored, this is what happens. That's why we're here today, right? Now the system, I keep saying that it does work, right? You got guys who coming out like myself with doing open network, college learning, getting all this qualification, but the real issue is when they come outside, all that help is gone. So they're back to square one. What I think would work, and follow me on this, they're like babies when they go back inside, because they're behind the wall. They don't know what's going on. Some of them are drugs, alcohol, and all of that, right? Alcohol is the main one. That's free. You can buy that over the counter, right? But if they've been nurtured, looked after, prepare them for outside. Then when they get outside, the agencies that Paul talk about, Kev talk about, the agencies step in and grab these guys and monitor them, nurture them. They can get employment instead of going to the tax office and asking for money. I hated that. I was forced to go there when I realized the kind of money they're going to give me for 2 weeks. I'm a guy used to a whole chicken on my plate. I'm not used to, these little bits and pieces. And I say to myself, you know what? I didn't know what a CV was. I grew up in New York. I don't know what a CV was. I met Vicky Gillette from the probation service just on one of these talks here. And she pulled me aside. She said, you know what? I'm going to train you. She did. I volunteered for the probation service for 3 years. My record is good, impeccable. Because you know what? As Paul has said, as Kevin said, you have to have people with the experience of other persons that they're talking about. Meaning, I don't know about brain surgery. So how can I relate to a brain surgeon if he's talking all this gibberish? I can't. But I'm an ex-offender. I can relate to a guy that's been locked behind the door because I know exactly what he's going through. So he'll more pay attention to what I have to say. He'll give me everything he's got inside. And then when he gives me that, I can all put it down and turn his life around. I've given him the points that I use to make me so progressive when I come out to society. I don't think that they should be looked at as downcast or outcast, because some of you students here, and older folks, know about Plato, Socrates, and Michael, Paul, and these people have big impact on their lives through issues. But did you know they all been locked up? They were all locked up. And the guy that frightens me most is Socrates. And he shaped the system that locked him up. And he could have walked away, but he said no. And any of you know about the story, he decided that the system said, I'm supposed to die, I'm going to drink that poison, and he did it. He stuck to it to death. Right? Now that's a person that believes in the system. Now I'm kind of like that, but I'm not going to drink the poison. No way. I believe in the system here. The system does work, right? A lot of you have never been inside before. Maybe some of you do, or not in the closet, but that's not my business anyway, right? But before you think about the person inside is bad or whatever, a lot of people go inside for many things, but we have to make sure that when they come back into society to live with us, they're productive. You don't put them as outcasts. You don't do that. You have to make them see themselves worthwhile. They got families too. They make mistakes. We're not robots. We're prone to mistakes. A lot of us in here make mistakes, and that's how we learn from them. We learn from our mistakes. I do. I learn from mine. I capitalize on it. And I'm here today. And I move on, and I'm still here. I move on, I'm still here. I move on, I'm still here. The reason why I'm saying that is you move from one step to another. It's like going up a ladder. Now, the offenders, they take drugs, they shoplift, they feed their habits, and all that. What Kev talked about dip test, I've been through that. But I've never been a smoker, I've never been a drinker. So I've always passed. But the dip test has forced me to go to Turning Point. I don't know if Turning Point still exists. Turning Point. Turning Point put me on to norms. Norms put me on to AA, and I've been through all that system. And I've created something in the jail that an officer, I forget his name, but he's in Wellington. He started, anyone you know about toe by toe? You know about toe by toe? Good, good. I was one of the first ones to put that across. Richard Banton. My name's always at the bottom of the certificates. Always. You might see RB and the scribbling, that's me. Toe by toe help most of these offenders by not reoffending because they're illiterate. They don't know how to read, they don't know how to do math, they don't know anything. But toe by toe, because they are so, they're shy. They don't want to go into a classroom, people knowing they can't read. They used to unlock guys like us up there, everybody's locked up, to go to cells and sit on a one-to-one basis and take me through the ABCs and 1, 2, 3, just like a baby. So when they hit class, they know stuff, but that's confidential. All right, what I want to leave you with is, someone said something that all of us can't be great persons, yeah, but a great person can come from anywhere. A great person can come from any part of the world, right? And today is the day that you will understand that we need in our society, especially for the upcoming ones, the students. I'm not picking on you guys, but students, I really love you guys. You got the opportunity to do good, do it. Because the baddest guys in the world are police. They're all bad, they're the biggest gangsters. When they come, you're definitely going to go down, right? So I just got to be farewell to all you guys. Thanks for listening to me, okay? And any program you have going on, don't be afraid to call on me. I'll come and talk to anybody for you guys. Anyone, okay? Whether it be on what topic, any topic you want to talk about. What is something to do with the prison system? Because I'm a real product of that. I tell you, all the prisons I've been to Panama, to Jamaica, New York, where I grew up, I've been in that system so much that if you're a 14 precinct police, they would see me and call me by my name. Seriously. And when I got here, I thought it was like easy, but it's not easy because I got in trouble here. But this is the country that turns me around. Because the other rest of countries, they let you know that prison is prison. Prison is not a travel lodge. This country, the prison system is like a travel lodge, but it does work. Because the programs are set up for there. It's there. The programs are set up for them to work. I thank you all for listening to me, and I hope I talk to you again sometime.